Welcome to the podcast, 10 Reasons Why Europeans Are Better. Based on how many messages I received in our last 10 Reasons episode, 10 Reasons Why Pittsburgh Basketball Sucks, if you haven't listened to that one, put that on your Save for Later playlist or whatever it's called, because it's definitely a good one. And let's just say that I received a lot of angry messages from people. One of them was funny though. Quote unquote, don't poop where you eat. Well, they didn't say poop, but go ahead and substitute the more intense version of that word in there. But that one was funny, made me laugh. The rest of them were from people that are just proud of being from Pittsburgh. That pretty much sums it up. Because I asked almost all of them, nicely, calmly, politely, ready to argue, ready to justify my points, but in a cool and collected type of way. Know what I mean? I asked them which number was wrong, and they couldn't come up with any arguments. Not a single one. It just hurt their feelings. They were mad that somebody said the truth, because the truth hurts. And you know what? Some of those same people came up to me in person at random local games that I go to, and they would say, you know what? I listened to it all the way through, and you're right. Which is cool to hear affirmation, but I know I'm right. Look around. There's too much potential here for Pittsburgh to be this bad. Anyway, take a listen if you haven't. But because that episode got so much traction and engagement, I'm pretty sure this episode is going to hurt some feelings too. 10 reasons why Europeans are better. And you know what? It should. How can we as Americans have by far the best facilities? By far. Financial resources, coaches, and everything required to produce the best, smartest, most skilled players on earth. How can we fall so short? How can we lag so far behind Europeans now? How did that happen? It's our game. I mean, technically the inventor of the game, James Naismith, he was Canadian, but he invented basketball in the States, so it's ours. You know, typically proud American. It's ours. It's an American game. But it is. Period. Yet, look at the current NBA. Look at all the isolation basketball. Quick threes being chucked up. Lazy defense. Bad attitudes. For sure I'm generalizing, but there's some reasons that the ratings are down, right? And what do you think they are? What are those reasons? I'm not going to get into my thoughts on that right now, but facts are facts. Ratings are indeed down. And when you look at the rosters, what changes have you noticed over the years? How are those rosters changing? For sure, it seems like guys are getting taller and taller, more athletic. But for sure, you've also noticed that there's a bunch of guys whose names you probably can't pronounce correctly. They're taking over. Foreigners, Europeans, non-Americans. And before I get into the 10 reasons why Europeans are better, ask yourself, why are Europeans taking over? And they're not just there, like sitting on the bench and happy to get those cool NBA socks for free. They're not just there. They're not scrubs. In fact, look at the last several NBA MVPs, Rookies of the Year, Defensive Players of the Year, lottery draft picks. Nikola Jokic, Luka Doncic, Giannis, Gobert, Markkanen, Wemby, Sabonis, Wagner. Too many to name. Anybody pop out in your head that I missed? Any major ones that you're like, man, Pete should have mentioned that guy for sure? If so, pause it right now. Go leave that name in the comments section. But no cheating. Don't go do a Google search and find a name just because. Only leave it in the comments if it popped in your head immediately. Fair enough? Okay, so whether it makes you feel angry that Europeans are invading the NBA and college, we'll talk more about that later. Or maybe it makes you proud of your heritage. Maybe your grandma or grandfather came over on a boat from Italy or Poland or Serbia a long time ago. Maybe it makes you feel warm and fuzzy inside to know that your people are doing their thing. But no matter how it makes you feel, facts are facts. And it's true that NBA scouts, coaches, GMs, and all those nerdy dudes in the offices that get paid to find talent, they all see that European players are better. I didn't say more athletic, but they're better at playing basketball. And guys like Jokic and Doncic and all those other names I mentioned, plus whoever you already typed into the comment section, those guys are clearly better than their counterparts here. Or else, the league would be exclusively American. And 100% of the players in every roster would be Americans. But it's not like that. So why? Well, first you have to understand, and I want to help you understand that as an American, everything you know about basketball development, our current model here, travel teams, middle school, high school, AAU, college, all of that is different there. All of it. There are no school teams in Europe. It's a completely different model. You go to school, then if you want to play sports, you play for a local club. Sometimes those clubs are specifically or exclusively dedicated to basketball, although most of the time they offer a wide variety of sport offerings. Soccer, or football as it's known in Europe, swimming, karate, dancing, whatever. All of those activities are through a club, not through your school. So you have to start with that foundation of understanding. Because I know that sounds so weird for American ears, but there are no school sports. Not like we know them. You play for your local club. And if you show promise, or your parents are willing to drive you further, you try out and maybe make it with a bigger club a little bit further away that has more players just like you that are hungry to work and learn. And eventually, you get to an age where maybe you move away from home to play for an even better club, known for producing and developing talent. And you stay in a dorm or with a guest family, whatever it takes as you climb the ladder. So no school sports. You play for a club. And because Europe is comprised of a bunch of different countries that just within my lifetime started using a common currency. So that's easier as you cross borders. But those people on the other side of that border, even though they now use euros to purchase things, they speak a different language. And to compare that to America, we're a tad spoiled in that wherever we go in all 50 states, we can speak English. Maybe a different slang or different sounds here and there between Boston or Texas and all that, but the same language nonetheless. But in Europe, those kids that travel a little bit, they're exposed to completely different languages. And because those countries are closer, it makes sense to learn some of them because there's a high likelihood that you'll need it at some point. So those kids not only know how to speak their own language, but they also learn English and at least one more foreign language in school. And they actually get chances to use them when they travel. It's not just the book Spanish that most American kids learn in school here, just to pass, just to get a good grade. It feels like most American kids that take a language in school, they can't even order their own food in Spanish if they go to an authentic Mexican restaurant. Think about that. So Europeans are more educated, speak multiple languages, are well-traveled, they play for clubs. Just some things to keep in mind as we dive into the 10 reasons why Europeans are better. And I want to be 100% transparent. I've lived 15 years of my adult life in Europe, and there are some Europeans that suck. Not everybody's Luka Doncic, but overall, they're superior, and their model is superior to ours for several reasons. I briefly mentioned athleticism already, and they're just way less focused on athleticism being the defining trait of their game. They also care way more about winning. It's just a part of their culture to be team-oriented in how they think, in how they operate. And they can't even pretend to understand our AAU system, where kids change teams every summer, or even partway through the season. So without further ado, reason number 1, why Europeans are better. They're more skilled. Listen to me as I say it again. They're more skilled. Europeans are way more skilled. And I mean overall. Most Americans just think of scoring when it comes to skills. Or they think of dribbling. Like and one type moves and ankling people, dribbling as many times as necessary to get a highlight. Screw your teammates, everybody get out of the way because I'm about to eat. There's clearly more to it. Europeans, on the other hand, they love to see somebody attack the paint, throw a single hand pass to the open corner, extra pass, and open shot. That's what excites them. Americans want to see a tall, strong, fast guy dribble around somebody and then jump even higher than somebody else to dunk it. Is that a generalization? Yes, it is. And there's going to be more. But sometimes to differentiate, you have to generalize and simplify for the point to be understood. Europeans know how to score and dribble, but they want to be efficient. Well, whether they want it or not, their coaches teach and make them understand the value of being efficient. So their skills and skill work are designed to prepare them to be able to navigate the constraints of a game. Have you ever heard the term positionless? That describes Europeans. Tall guys that can shoot, guards that can post, everybody can pass, everybody knows how to think the game, everybody knows how to move the ball, everybody knows how to find the right player in the right situation to make the right play. No weak links. Nobody on a team that you can just leave open because they can't shoot. And young players in Europe are consistently and systematically thrust into environments in which they're always working on their skills. And positions don't matter to them. Everybody learns how to do everything. For sure, the cream rises to the top. Some guys eventually will be taller than others, but they're all taught how to shoot. They're all taught how to pass with either hand. They all work on footwork from every spot on the floor, so they can pivot, navigate, and manipulate space. I remember when I first got to Europe and a player was coming at me in transition, and he did this move that I had never seen before. I now know it as the Yugo step, although I've heard it called a bunch of other names. You know what the triple jump is, right? Like when you're flipping through the channels and you come across track and field, and they're showing some field events as the 100-meter sprinters are warming up or whatever. For those that don't know, the triple jump is basically the long jump with extra steps, but you have to jump off one foot, land on that same foot, and then stride and take one last jump off your opposite foot. Well, somebody somewhere in Europe, apparently a player or coach from the former Yugoslavia, which is now broken up into Serbia, Croatia, Montenegro, Macedonia, Slovenia, and Bosnia-Herzegovina. So somebody took that triple jump footwork and applied it to basketball. And it technically wasn't traveling because at the time the rule simply said that a player is allowed 2 steps. So they figured out a way to take the first with the same foot as the last dribble and then take a long, awkward stride into the layup. It was hard to guard because it put defenders in a weird position because it was different. Hard to figure out the timing. That move is now considered traveling, but it shows the ingenuity of Europeans and their willingness to use their feet to find an advantage. Probably connected to their soccer roots, but footwork is a vital part of their skill development. And for sure you've heard of the Euro step. And I guarantee you've been to a game at some point over the years, probably a while back, especially when this move first kind of started becoming popular. I'm sure you've seen some senior citizen aged referee call a Euro step a travel. It still happens today. I still hear parents at games who probably haven't kept up with the times yelling out, "That's a travel, ref!" And in all fairness, if you've never seen it before, it does look different because of the sideways stepping motion and the overall trickery, but it's definitely not a travel, and the move is now ubiquitous at almost every level of the game. And think about the name, Euro step. So you already know which highly skilled players invented that. Europeans are skilled from top to bottom, and using their feet and hands and skills to move the ball and relocate, a style in which each spoke of the wheel is strong. That's special. And even if you're the type of person that likes to argue, just for the sake of arguing, and I have some friends like that too, think about your friend group. Can you think of one person who will literally flip-flop their opinion on you mid-conversation just to stir the pot a little bit, just to argue? For sure you have a friend like that. And they're probably from New York City. If you can't think of who that friend is in your circle, it's probably you. And if you're shaking your head that it's not you, then maybe you just proved it to yourself. So even for those of you that like to argue, you can't deny that Europeans are more skilled. Kobe Bryant, rest in peace, had a pretty cool quote on the topic a few years ago. "I just think European players are just way more skillful. They are just taught the game the right way at an early age." He goes on to say a lot more. Google it for the full quote. But he also had a lot of disparaging things to say about the AAU model that I'm in agreement with. So let's agree that Europeans are more skilled. But for those pieces to fit together, and for all those individuals to function together as a team, for the pass to happen at the right time, for the cut to happen at the right moment, that takes intelligence too. But it takes supremely skilled players to make that happen. Which takes us to reason number 2, why Europeans are better. Smarter. They play a better brand of basketball. Team basketball. Because they're smarter. Think about what we discussed with their skills, and then being more focused on what their hands do. Shooting, passing, dribbling. And what their feet do. Pivoting, relocating, spacing, Euro stepping all over the place. And one of the main reasons that they're so good at decision making, which is a clear sign of intelligence, even if it's trained, one of the super simple reasons that they're so good at decision making is because they grow up from a young age playing with a 24-second shot clock. I've been pretty vocal about this and how embarrassing it is and how damaging it is for the development of high school players in all the states that still don't have a shot clock because those players show up unprepared for college. And I'm not purposely going out of my way to try to make any enemies, but playing with a shot clock, a 24-second shot clock, that forces those young European players to make more decisions every game. Think about the times you watch games. Let's say high school games in the States. In those states that don't have a shot clock. Or middle school games. Are there any states that play with a shot clock in middle school, by the way? If you live in a state that uses a shot clock in middle school, please leave a comment and tell us which state. But think about those games. No shot clock. How many times at the end of the quarters, players dribble out the clock and don't even get a shot up? Or shoot it obnoxiously too soon and then give the other team a chance to come down and get a really good shot? Like, really think about that. There's more reasons why European players are smarter, but this one simple thing is a huge reason why they simply better understand time and score. And if you've ever played basketball before and your coach was even kind of smart, you've heard that phrase, time and score, right? If you grow up in a situation in which you're constantly aware of a clock with 24 seconds on it, ticking away, you get used to that. You get used to peeking up and seeing how much time is left. It affects decisions on offense. Should I shoot? Is there enough time to pass? There's no time to reset plays and just start again from scratch. There's no keep away or a player standing near half court with the ball resting on his hip because the defense is sitting in a zone. That doesn't exist. Every possession has a time limit. Every possession matters. Every possession requires thought. Every possession demands awareness on offense and on defense. So the shot clock part is huge. I can't stress that enough. But let's dive into other aspects of Europeans being smarter basketball players. Why is their basketball IQ so much higher? We mentioned how they play in clubs earlier, and there's different levels at each club, youth levels, under 12, under 14, under 16, under 19, and they work their way up. And the best ones eventually work their way up to the top team, which probably plays in an arena that attracts attention and has fans. So these kids are used to being in and around and near an environment where they get a chance to see their idols in action. And they watch their games in person, on TV, live streamed, whatever. They watch full games, seeing actions and sequences that mirror the same concepts that they're learning. So by the time young players move up the ladder, having played for a club since they were a little boy or a little girl, they know the system. It's not like they need to learn the style of play. They are the style of play. It's in their DNA. It's a part of their mental makeup, how they're wired. They know the rules. They know the tricks of the trade. They understand the bonus situation, how many fouls to give at the end of the quarter. That's a big thing in Europe. They're smarter than their American peers. And all of that skill work, all of that intelligence, it's being shaped somewhere. All of those drills, all of those simple decision-making drills, skill work, that's happening somewhere. It's happening in practice. And since we're talking about practice,
And we in here talking about practice. I mean, listen, we talking about practice.
which takes us to reason number 3, why Europeans are better. More practices than games. Let's really dive in deep and talk about the mathematics of these practice schedules. I want you to think about a typical high school basketball season. Here in Pittsburgh, it lasts a couple months. Let's say 4, so we have a number to work with. So you get 22 games, plus playoffs and whatever scrimmages. That's the high school model in a nutshell. Middle school is different, depending on where you live, the school district, whether it's only through your school or if it's travel. Some places have both. So you have a bunch of games, hopefully some good practices. Depends on who's coaching the team, to be honest. Buildings are cool, but it's the people inside the buildings that matter most, right? So hopefully you have a good coach. And now, let's talk about the AAU model, which is taking over more and more every year. There's players that don't even play for their school teams anymore. It's been happening in soccer and baseball now for a while, but now it's happening in basketball too. And AAU organizations and tournament organizers are capitalizing on the fact that some parents want something better, or what they think is better anyways. So I predict, and I can see a time in the future, when the best kids no longer play for their school teams and get together for games in far-off places, which basically means AAU is year-round. But let's stick with what currently exists on a broad scale. AAU is basically April, May, June, even though high school teams can now choose to play in the live period, and July, and many times even starting with tournaments as early as March and going through August. So 6 months of AAU games. How many times do these kids get together to practice? How good are these practices? That's another question, but it's not unusual for kids to maybe practice once a week and then go play 5 or 6 games on the weekend. And even though there's more rules in place now to try to stop kids from playing on multiple teams, to limit how many games they play in a weekend, people find a way around that. But let's just use that math. 1 practice per week for 5 or 6 games. Think about that. Think long and hard about that ratio. 1 to 5. Remember that. And also think about how quickly AAU players forget about the last game. Maybe out of necessity, because it's time to eat a few slices of pizza or granola bar and then go play again. Missed box outs? There's no time to go work on those in practice before the next game. Not in proper help side? Reading the pick and roll coverage completely wrong? Not snapping your wrist on free throws? Maybe you notice it. Maybe your coach tells you. Maybe your mom or dad tells you in between games. But you're playing 5 games in a weekend. How much adjusting can you really do? Back to the drawing board, that type of improvement. Adjustments. How much of that can you really do? How much of that is going to happen in an AU environment with that ratio, 1 to 5? Now let's look at the European model. And I'm going to keep this super simple. Players practice basically every day, and depending on the age level, probably 2-a-days. There's a lifting plan, video review, prehab, the exercises that unfortunately most Americans only do once they get hurt, but the Europeans do while they're still healthy so they can avoid getting hurt. So let's look at that workload. On the easy end of the spectrum, practice Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, play Saturday, and Sunday off. Repeat that for 10 months. That's the light version. So we're talking 5 practices for 1 game. Now compare that ratio to the AAU ratio. 1 to 5 compared to 5 to 1. It's completely the opposite. So those games in Europe, those games matter. It's like not feeding a lion all week and then letting him free in an open field where there's antelopes and zebras running around. Europeans are starving to play. They've been scratching at the cage all week, building up, working, learning, repeating, grinding, shooting, passing, pivoting, cutting, thinking. By the time the weekend comes around, they can't wait to play. The anticipation and buildup is crazy. And think about the quality of that one game. With the shot clock, by the way. Had to remind you of that. I'm sorry. But think about that one game. 40 minutes, 4 times 10-minute quarters, decisions galore, and against an opponent that went through the same schedule you did. A week full of practices, of corrections and adjustments. There's no substitute for work in anything in life. Good, wholesome, old-fashioned hard work. That's how you get better, and that's how you produce. So all those extra practices, remember, 5 practices for 1 game compared to the complete opposite in the AU model. Over a period of time, there's some serious math to do. How many extra practices does a European get compared to an American kid? Quality practices with skill work, decision making, thinking, and that's on the small end of the spectrum. Imagine the players that are doing 2-a-days. And some of those morning practices on those 2-a-days are probably skill sessions or shooting or video or weights or individuals. So maybe not as grueling as a full team practice, but still building reps, habits, skills, and intelligence. So those skill sessions, the footwork, the team practices, it all starts to add up over time when you're getting quality repetition with really good coaching, which takes us to reason number 4, why Europeans are better. Better coaching. I want you to imagine a scenario where a guy decides he wants to be a doctor. So he hands out his resume or CV, as they're known in Europe, hands those out to some people, tightens up his social media profile, finds an established doctor, takes out the trash for a couple years, washes the equipment, puts it down in his resume that he has however many years of experience in the medical field, and then starts applying to hospitals. Maybe a small hospital from the countryside really needs a doctor on staff, so they hire him. That sounds ludicrous, right? Like, there's no way in hell that could ever happen. I mean, it probably did in the past, but not these days. Not with rules, not with standards. But let's switch out the word doctor and substitute the word coach instead. Now it doesn't seem so far-fetched, does it? My point is that it's not very hard to be a middle school or even a high school basketball coach in the States. And please don't get me wrong. I'm not talking bad or disparaging about coaches or the profession itself. What I'm saying is that literally anybody can apply. And then it comes down to who you know, how well you interview, and then supply and demand. More on that in a minute. Now, on the flip side, what does it take to be an AAU coach? There's more regulations in place now, and USA Basketball has started some nice initiatives. I actually applaud them and really like what they're doing. But historically, anybody with an ability to sell themselves and win some kids over, they were able to start an AAU team. There's all kinds of stories out there about drug dealers starting teams and things like that. And those teams had some amazingly gifted players sometimes too. But what were those kids learning? Meaning, what qualities are required as prerequisites to be a good youth coach in America? Like I said, USA basketball is doing some good things, and I'm very happy about it. But they still have a long way to go to catch up with what's required in Europe. Because in Europe, you probably never heard of this, but in Europe, you need a license to coach. Yes, coaches are licensed. You have to have a coaching license if you want to coach in Europe. Every country is different and has their own federation and certification process and all that. But the general idea and overview that I want to share with you is that coaches go through a rigorous process of onboarding and education. Clinics, seminars, meetings, lectures, and it takes time and it costs money. And there's different levels. You start at the bottom and you work your way up, and it's not easy. Basically, they want to ensure that you're qualified to teach, that you know the game, that you know the human body, that you're committed to your craft. It was weird at first for me too, because it was just different. But I really respect it and the thought process behind it. I mean, would you want just anybody driving on the streets without a license? Would you want a doctor performing surgery on you that's not certified? So coaches in Europe are better because there's an investment that's been made into their education. And because they're in Europe, exposed to so much high level, high IQ basketball, they're used to those actions and having to think their way through the problem solving that comes with finding ways to score and stop a team in 24 seconds over and over and over again. I'm not sure if any of you listening are into high level X's and O's, but there's been a trend over the last several years of NBA coaches, NCAA coaches, either hiring Europeans as their assistants and tasking them with some of the strategy and tactical stuff, or watching EuroLeague games, observing the trends, and then stealing ideas and actions. And that's a big part of basketball. Stealing good ideas is nothing new, and there's nothing wrong with it. Chalk it up to having a good scouting department, because when you see a play work over and over, and you're trying so hard to come up with ways to stop it, sometimes the best solution is, if you can't beat them, join them, and teach your team that play and throw it right back at them. So the entire landscape is like a big incubator for basketball minds, and they're constantly exposed to innovative actions because there's a trickle-down effect from the EuroLeague teams that are based in their home country but travel around and play the best teams from all over Europe. So those coaches are exposed to new plays, new concepts, new ideas. Then they go back to their domestic games, adapt and apply some new ideas, which invariably get stolen there as well, and also by the youth coaches in those programs. So those scenarios, those actions, European coaches aren't running dribble drive or flex for 1 minute straight or 2 minutes. They can't. There's a shot clock. They have to figure out how to get players in a position efficiently and effectively in a limited amount of time while still thinking about how to punish the other team in terms of making them fight through screens and risking fouls, finding mismatches, getting their shooters open, little things like that. It's sad and funny. You know, the Greek masks for acting. You always see those two masks together. One is smiling, almost laughing, and the other is sad, almost crying. Imagine those two emotions mixed together. And that's how I feel when I think about some high school coaches who have really good shooters on their team, yet never even run a play for them. No stagger, no elevator, no Spanish decoy back screen, no go screen, just wasting talent because they want to run dribble drive or whatever continuity offense over and over and over until the defenders get bored or fall asleep. Stuff like that doesn't happen in Europe. It can't. Coaches are smarter. Coaches know the game. Coaches are exposed to coaches and ideas from other countries, and they're tested and put through a strict licensing process just for the right to be able to coach. There's a lot of high school coaches in America that not only don't understand time and score, they don't understand the bonus situation and understanding how to make substitutions to make a tactical foul to stop the clock or to run a certain play based on how the defense has been playing in order to force a foul on the other team's best player, in order to squeak out a couple extra free throws while sending him or her to the bench. And coaches in Europe are still more important than the players. The NBA salary structure is so out of whack now, the players make way more money than the coaches. So if there's a problem, the owner or GM just fires the coach and gets a new coach because it's cheaper than getting a new LeBron. Think about that. Look at all the coaches over the last several years who were fired after winning a championship or winning the Coach of the Year award the previous year or two. It's astounding. That doesn't happen in Europe. The coaches are still in charge. And players learn this at every step of the way, which takes us to reason number 5, why Europeans are better. Less entitled. Players in Europe grow up hungry and willing to listen and work. I'm not saying we also don't have that here. We do. But overall, because the youth development models are so different, players there are way less entitled. Players there are there. They're way less entitled. They're not changing teams every week during the AAU season based on who promises them the most or the coolest sneakers. They work and they appreciate what they get. Some of the gyms suck, like are bad. Slippery floors, lighting is bad, no room on the other side of the baseline and sidelines. But they show up every day and they work. No complaints, just work. It's a mindset. And you'll see players go to their home games early to set up the court, to sweep the floor, move stuff from here to there, to roll out the chairs, set up the benches, set up the scorers table. They do all that. So they get used to working and understanding that it's not about them as an individual. It's about the team. It's about the club. It's about the greater good. And it's also not unusual for players from one team to be assigned tasks for a different age group. So the under 14 players, they do the stats and scorebook or run the clock or the shot clock for the under 16 games. That's normal. That's just how it is. They're not entitled because they're not used to getting handed a bunch of free stuff. They have to work for everything. They have to earn nicer stuff. And by being a part of the setup or cleanup crew, together with their teammates, not even just their team, but for the entire club, it's subconsciously reinforcing that team is more important than any one person. Which takes us to reason number 6, why Europeans are better. Less selfish. Think about what I just described. Working, doing things together, for the good of the club. This builds a culture of togetherness. I'm really intrigued by the age-old question of, when do you start focusing on winning? Like, when do you put all your energy and focus into winning games? Is that at the youngest youth levels? Or should you focus more on development and play the long game? European clubs have plans in place, and there's structure. There's a curriculum. There's a mission and vision of how to get players from the youngest mini basketball levels, what we would call little dribblers here, how to get players from the youngest mini levels to the top. They have a plan. They have a plan on how to get players from level to level, with consistent teaching, with the big picture in mind. Almost like, how do we make sure that these young kids learn and improve enough so that some of them can play for our top team someday? Pure math means that not everybody will make it to the top, but they're all learning and they're all being exposed to high-level consistent teaching that's connected from one level to the next. Because the coaches from the under 12 communicate with the coaches from the under 14 team, and so on and so on. And they all have the same boss, the sports director who oversees all of it, knowing full well that they're developing future players as well as future fans, because not all of them will make it. But the goal isn't to win under 12 championships. If it happens, cool, but that's not their goal. The goal is to develop players for the future. And everybody knows this. All the coaches, all the staff. So they aren't as worried about what anybody else thinks. They don't have to worry about meddling parents or people saying they should be playing Nicola or Johan or Luigi or Ishmael or Franz or Kareem. They just focus on their job and push players with the constraints of their curriculum. So there's no selfishness amongst the coaches trying to chase wins, which means they're not playing only their best kids or focused only on their best kids in practices. They're trying to develop everybody equally. So that naturally trickles down to the players, even at the youngest ages, knowing that they're working toward the top level. Remember, it's a club. It's all connected. Players work and learn and develop and understand the process far better than American kids, because American kids change AAU organizations like they're spitting out a piece of gum that lost its flavor. And not even from summer to summer, sometimes during the summer. And in some crazy situations, maybe even during a tournament. That's as selfish as you can possibly get. European kids don't even know what that means. They can't even comprehend that, even if you explain it to them in their own native language. It just doesn't make sense for their team-first brains to even process. Europeans are used to doing things together, with solidarity, with camaraderie. This may sound like it's off topic, and I'm not trying to be funny, merely pointing something out. European kids still use the locker rooms after practices and games to take showers. When's the last time you ever heard of an American kid taking a shower at the school or gym after practice or a game? American high school kids go play a road game, sweat, get stinky, wet underwear, wet socks, wet undershirt, maybe change their sneakers, throw on a hoodie and put their headphones on, and get back on the bus or in the car and go home. It wasn't always like that, but that's how it is now. Whereas European kids are so used to being together, working together, being punished together, being praised together, playing defense together, playing as a team together. They're used to problem solving, doing team bonding events, sometimes in practices, little drills that the coaches come up with. Team of 12, for example, divide into 2 teams of 6. Each has 2 gymnastic mats and has to figure out how to get from one baseline to the other without anybody stepping on the gym floor. Sometimes they call these games lava, as if the floor is made out of molten lava. That builds chemistry. That builds communication. Coaches are constantly reinforcing good team habits, not who scores the most points. In fact, they don't even really care about that at the youth levels. In Europe, they care more about this stat called plus minus, which shows what type of impact you had on the team by showing what happened when you were on the floor. For example, you, my listener, you're a player, we're in Europe. You check in, your team is losing by 3. You play the last 4 minutes of the quarter. You never even touch the ball. That's kind of unrealistic, but I just want to use an extreme example so you understand the general premise of the plus minus. So you never touch the ball. You have no shots, no rebounds, no assists, no steals, but you're always in good help side. You cut like crazy. You box out. You talk on defense. You help your teammates up after they get fouled. So the team is feeling good, playing hard, playing together, and having success. And at the end of the quarter, you guys took the lead, and now you're winning by 5. So your team went from down 3 to up 5, which means that when the coaches look at the stat sheet, you're plus 8, which means you're having a positive impact on your team. Those are the type of things that European coaches reward and encourage. They love seeing the extra pass. They love seeing players that shrink the floor in transition. They love when the ball moves and they get good shots. Even when the shooter misses, they still clap their hands and show approval. You know how Europeans are always talking with their hands, right? So imagine some Italian youth coach, or Spanish, or French, or Serbian. The ball is moving around. Attack, kick out, extra pass, an open catch and shoot shot. You can see that coach now in your mind, demonstratively nodding in approval and clapping his hands high above his head, not even making noise, like a professional mime. Now imagine that coach when a player dribbles 10 times and forces up a shot, even if he makes it. That same European coach will be shrugging his shoulders and lifting both palms towards the sky as if appealing to the gods themselves. Maybe a good foot stomp or two, then walking away toward the end of the bench, shaking their head. Not discreet either, but like flabbergasted, as if the player just kicked the ball out of the window. And you already know what comes next. And depending on the moment, maybe the hand gesturing stops, but the point was made. That player will learn to play as a team, for the team, with the team, or else he'll sit on the bench. And every other player learned from seeing that as well. So all the selfishness is squeezed out at a very early age. And this is such a simple way of measuring whether you're watching European basketball or not, almost like a litmus test, because they have a strict formula that they like to adhere to at every age level. Less dribbling plus more passing equals team basketball. That's it. So simple. That's what European basketball is all about. For sure, there's more details and nuances involved. But less dribbling and more passing are such huge staples of how they want to play because the ball moves and it's less selfish. So remember that part. Less dribbling, more passing. And what do you think some of the other ingredients are? Which takes us to reason number 5, why Europeans are better. Off-ball movement. We just talked about how they appreciate and reward passing. And I did an entire episode on something called Thank the Passer. Give that a listen if you haven't yet. But that's how they're taught to play. The players know it, the coaches expect it, and even the crowd celebrates it. But you can't just pass the ball around the three-point line, right? Everybody's standing around, 5 players outside the three-point line. If everybody just stands around, defenses will figure that out and crowd them, and there won't be space for anybody. So if it's not realistic to pass to a bunch of players all standing outside the three-point line, and we know that Europeans treasure passing, what's missing? Movement. Movement is missing. Our social media team posted a funny video recently of a youth team doing a bunch of dribble handoffs, like 5 in a row or something like that. Just weaving and doing these mindless movements, not even looking to score or attack, just being robots. And it's sad because it's not these poor kids' fault, but they're just dribbling and handing off like trained circus animals because time doesn't matter. There's no shot clock. So they're just wasting time, not accomplishing anything, maybe hoping the defense gets bored and falls asleep. But that's not the type of movement I'm talking about. Europeans are amazing at cutting, moving, and spacing. Think about those words: cut, move, space. So you have somebody moving, typically sprinting through the paint, dragging defenders with them, like gravity. I'm sure you've heard that term before with Steph Curry, because wherever he runs on the court, all 5 defenders have to be aware. So it's like he's attracting attention everywhere he goes. And the more he moves, the more openings he creates for his teammates. So cutting is valuable because either the cutter is open or he attracts attention and somebody else can shift into an open area. Now let's briefly talk about some of the ways to move around the three-point line. Lift, drift, and shift. Lift is when a player leaves the corner and goes up to the wing. Because of a cutter relocating, but also typically seen on a single side pick and roll when the ball handler is attacking the double side and the screener's rolling to the rim. So the corner player lifts up to put pressure on that single defender to force him to make a difficult choice of whether to tag the roller or to stay home on the shooter. A drift is the exact opposite movement, moving from the wing to the corner because of a baseline drive from the opposite corner or because a slot player is dribbling toward you and you want to create space for the drive so your defender can't crowd and take away both. That's a drift. A shift is anytime a player moves along the three-point line, from the wing to the slot, from the slot to the top, from the slot to the slot, any movement between the wings or the slot areas to get into a better position to catch. And I want to point out that with all 3 of these simple movements, the idea is to move into a new position to create an opportunity to catch. I didn't say shoot, but move to catch, and then read the defense, which of course, Europeans are really good at because of all the reasons we've already mentioned. So these 3 simple actions happen all the time. They happen all the time in European basketball. And because of that, they practice them all the time. They do breakdowns with actions from their own plays, as well as actions from their opponents that they're either trying to figure out how to defend or stealing to add to their own playbook. But they do breakdowns on working these movements all the time. Let's look at some of the variations on a simple lift drill progression. So you lift, get the catch and shoot 3. The next step, lift, attack middle, which leads to a wide variety of assigned finishing moves. Layups, either hand, floaters, pull-ups, but also against defense. And then with the teammate in the corner or in the dunker spot, with the dummy defender taking away one of those choices. So the attacker has to make the right read, shoot when the defender stays home, or pass when he commits to stopping the attacker's shot. So they'll work and build through those variables. Work on both sides, both hands, get game speed reps with skills and decisions combined into one, all built on the premise that they're teaching and reinforcing movement, not just standing there and watching, not one player dribbling 20 times as 4 teammates stand around the three-point line, real movement. And I'm sure there are American coaches listening to this right now, high school coaches, feeling defensive, like, hey, we work on breakdowns in practice too, but not like they do. You don't. Admit it. You should, but you don't. Not yet anyways. Hopefully you start, but the vast majority of you don't. There's high school coaches in Pittsburgh that don't even know these 3 very basic terms: lift, drift, shift. Hopefully they're listening and hopefully they learn. The point of this podcast is to spread knowledge. So hopefully they're listening and they take some notes. So we talked about not standing. We talked about moving and relocating. But cutting is probably the easiest thing for players to do and arguably the easiest for coaches to teach and see because you actually see a human running toward the paint. So you have backdoors, face cuts, 45 cuts, corner cuts, all kinds of cutting. And to be great at it, the thing that really matters most is timing. But that takes practice and drills and reps and experience and a lot of film review. And Europeans do all of that. They're taught to cut when their defender turns their head to the ball. They're taught to set it up by coming a tad further out before planting and sprinting toward the rim. They're taught to show one target hand out in front so the passer can lead them to the hoop. They're taught not to stop halfway and dance back and forth, risking a turnover by confusing their teammate. They're taught to see the ball the entire way and not to turn their back to the ball at the end if they don't get it, just in case the passer throws it late. They're taught those things from an early age, and they just keep working and improving. And a quick side note, think about how much better they are at passing. Out of necessity, but it's like they get to show that they're better passers because they have teammates moving and cutting, so they have options. And it makes sense to pass when your teammates aren't just standing around, right? So they're really good at spacing the floor because they can all shoot, they cut, they move, they relocate. Spacing, movement, not just dribbling. And some of these things don't always result in highlights. A lot of times, one player cutting results in his or her teammate getting an open shot somewhere else because the defense got confused and both stayed with the cutter. And the catcher quickly goes through his progressions, his reads, his decisions. Was I open? Shot. Did they close out hard? Attack. Did help side slide over to protect the basket? Kick out. And on and on and on. They're not playing for highlights. They're playing as a team, using their brains, using their skills, playing together, knowing that over time, all the cuts, all the movement, all the spacing, it all equals out. And eventually everybody gets open shots. Everybody gets opportunities, depending on where and how the defense makes mistakes. Which takes us to reason number 8, why Europeans are better. Less hype. We just talked about how they're not chasing highlights. There is no AAU machine. No constant pressure to stand out and get exposure. If you're really good, you get invited to play for your country's national team because there is no AAU. The best kids are invited to represent their country, with teams ranging from youth levels up to the national teams that you're used to seeing play in the Olympics. And on those national teams, they're working basically the same way that you did for your club, just better players, because it's the best of the best in whatever age classification in the entire country. All those kids come together and have a couple weeks together to bond, build chemistry, and then fly to whatever Eastern European country to compete against all the other countries in their bracket. And the whole time, it's about the team, just like before, but maybe even more. Because you're wearing the flag of your country on your chest. So it's constantly on your mind as a player that it's bigger than you and your own individual performance. You see grown men crying tears of joy when they win the European Championships, and tears of sorrow when they lose, with the feeling of letting the entire country down. So there's no hype, and this crazy social media hype machine behind it with kids imitating whatever flashy move got them some views and likes. They have social media too, but it's different. The mindset is different. And because there's no school teams, there's no pep rallies and all that rah-rah stuff, which I'm not saying is bad. Pep rallies are cool. Pep rallies are fun. But my point is that they don't have them in Europe. In fact, most of the youth games, even under 16, under 18, under 19 teams, they're not packed with student sections screaming and having fun, dressed up as Marvel characters or beach night or whiteout, whatever else the theme might be like they do here in the States. They don't have that. So there's just so much more focus on the game itself. I was at a game recently in Pittsburgh and there were more camera guys along the baseline than there were players on the court. That doesn't happen in Europe. Not yet anyways. It's about the game, not the hype around it. And this is going to sound funny because it's not a school. It's a club, right? So there's no cheerleaders. Not until the pro level. And then they're dancers. Like beautiful women with some meat on their bones that know how to shake and, all right, I don't want to get too far off topic, but it's not a bunch of skinny chicks running around with pom-poms. So there's no pep rallies, no baselines full of cameras, way less social media stuff, no cheerleaders, overall less hype. Players aren't chasing likes and social media hype. They want to prove to their coaches that they can matriculate and move up the ladder. They're focused on their game and doing things right. And the best ones, the players that show promise, that takes us directly into reason number 9 why Europeans are better. They play against older players. So the players that show the most promise, they get invited to practice and maybe even play with the next older team, a level up. So a really good 14-year-old gets to practice with the under 16 team. or a talented 17-year-old gets to practice with the Pro B team. And in some cases, the really talented ones get to move all the way up and play with the top team. Have you heard of some guy named Luka Doncic? Yeah, that guy. A Slovenian that left his home when he was a kid to go live on his own and play for a club in Spain. And not just any club. Real Madrid, the Boston Celtics of the EuroLeague. And he debuted on that team at 16 years old. Clearly a special generational talent. But that's possible there, and it happens all the time. Every year, somewhere in Europe, there's a new Ricky Rubio or Wemby working their way up through the ranks. Think about that. A teenager playing against pros. Just the benefits that come through the practices alone do wonders for their development. We mentioned Luka, Ricky, Wemby, but think about all the names you don't even know yet that are out there working, developing, and practicing against pros, against men. When I coached in Germany, one year we had several young talents. That's what they call them, talents, quote unquote talents. We had several of them practicing with our Bundesliga team. And this team was stacked with talent. Americans that had gone to schools like Michigan State, West Virginia, Iowa State, tons of talent. And think about it, experienced men who had already been through their own battles and wars, going through college and wherever else they stopped along the way to get where they were. And these talents got to practice with and against them every day. And for sure, their bodies weren't quite ready. So the only way to keep up and compete was by using their brains, using their skills. And imagine what it was like going back down to their normal level, to their normal team, and playing against kids their own age. That type of developmental opportunity is priceless. Imagine America's best high school kids getting a chance to practice with college or even an NBA team when they're 16 or 17 years old, and having to keep up, not because they could run faster and jump higher, but having to keep up by using their brains and skills. That's what Europeans get. That's a part of their system. The talents get rewarded. They improve. They're challenged. They're stimulated. Then they return the favor and push the rest of their teammates at their normal level, and there's this constant trickle-down effect. And over time, these kids just get better and better. And of course, develop confidence. There was a time when Europeans were thought of as being soft. There was a time when Americans thought Europeans were scared. And I'm sure that existed back in 1992 when our dream team went over there to reclaim our throne, back when the other teams were asking to take pictures with them before and after the games. But now, those days are done. Europeans aren't scared anymore. They're used to playing against older players. And over time, they develop not just physically, but obviously mentally as well. And the key word there is time. Which takes us to reason number 10, why Europeans are better. Longer seasons. We briefly talked about the length of the high school and middle school seasons. Now imagine all these areas that we talked about. More practices than games, better coaching, all those areas. Now consider the fact that European seasons are 9, sometimes 10 months long. I remember my rookie year I played in France. We went to the finals. I flew home afterward, and 2 weeks later, I was already back in Europe, practicing with my new team. That was an extreme, but things like that happen. If a team starts earlier with preseason and your previous team made a deep run in the playoffs, that happens. Normally, Americans have their agents negotiate and get a longer break, but at that stage of my career, I didn't even know you could ask for something like that. So I flew home, said hi and goodbye to everybody, and then flew right back. And you may be thinking, that's just for pros. But no, European seasons last what feels like forever compared to what Americans are used to. But no, that's for everybody at every level. But those youth teams are full of Europeans, not Americans. And those Europeans are used to that workload. That's what they know. You start practice at some point in August, go straight through until May or June, depending on the playoffs, and you repeat. All of that is give or take a week here or there, depending on the country. And of course, a couple days here and there for Christmas or whatever. But you get the point. 10-month seasons. 10 months of practicing all the time just to get to the weekend game. 10 months of drills and teaching and instruction from really good coaches. Over time, it all adds up. So no wonder Europeans are more skilled. It's like they're being churned out of a factory. Hungry to work, not entitled, used to working together, unselfish, carrying the benches to set up the games, working on decision making and passing, cutting, spacing. day after day after day, week after week, month after month, and year after year, until they all just seem to understand the game better than American players. It's not magic. And they're skilled enough to do everything on the court. That's not magic. There's pros and cons to everything, but there's a reason why there's more non-American players than ever before in the NBA. And the same thing is happening in college. A good friend of mine is a huge Penn State fan. So he's always watching them, always going to basketball games, goes to their football games. And recently he noticed when they were playing a game that the opposing team's two best players were foreigners. And he wasn't even surprised. He just wanted to tell me, because we've had discussions about basketball development and some of the differences between how they do things there compared to our model here. He just wanted to let me know. And you know what? There's going to be a lot more where that came from. The gates are open. And there's going to be more and more Europeans infiltrating the NBA and NCAA over these next bunch of years. For all the reasons I just listed. More skilled, smarter, more practices than games, better coaching, less entitled, less selfish, off-ball movement, less hype, more practices than games, longer seasons. If you enjoyed this episode, please share and spread the word. I'm sure some of our listeners will disagree with some of these points, and I'd be curious to know why. Denial is not just a river in Africa. So I hope you're not in denial and too proud to admit and at least consider that maybe, just maybe what they're doing over there is working better than our current model in America. Yes, we have talent here. Yes, we have potential here. Yes, we have amazing facilities here and resources galore. But take away the free throw line dunks and step back threes from almost half court and ask yourself, really ask yourself, how have we allowed Europeans to not only close the gap, but to start to take over? And sometimes if you don't step back to improve your vantage point, it's hard to see the big picture sometimes. Almost like a Monet. You have to step back a certain distance away so you can see what's really going on. If you haven't already subscribed, do that now. Turn notifications on so you can get our latest episodes as they come out, because we have a lot more coming your way. Come get some.